Since the outbreak of COVID-19, the word virus has been dominating media headlines as well as our daily lives. Did you know that one approach that has been proposed to control virally transmitted diseases is by releasing a virally transmitted vaccine? Unlike traditional vaccines, infectious vaccines do not require any individual consent. Infectious solutions are also being developed for food and agriculture and are currently making their way through the regulatory approval process. However, do we really want to intentionally disperse these modified viruses outside the lab? Is this a forward march of science or a mistake?
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Sunday, August 10th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. A really important follow-up to something we just talked about that wasn't something that it was a gut feeling based on the facts that I had in front of us around the direction that the U.S. government was going in contradiction to what the Maha movement expected, or really just the majority of Trump supporters as well. And this is about self-amplifying RNA, which is something we've talked about. As I'm saying, that is one article I need to grab from a long time ago that's relevant, but something we've talked about for a long time. Not just self-amplifying, but self-spreading. And I started with that clip again because there's an overlapping point to all of this. If you remember the Insect Allies conversation with DARPA and a while before COVID-19, the Free Thought Project covered that, and we shared that as well way back when. Same conversation. There's the different elements of all of this. But we're talking about something that overlaps with the way that these technologies are used. And the RNA conversation, also in food, that we'll talk about towards the end today, or the conversation about that in food potentially and where that goes, to me, put it simply, this is the direction they've shifted into, pivoted into. And I also argue, as I pointed this out, I don't even know how many times, that self-amplifying technology was actually the way the data looks. Again, I can never verify what the data they present is entirely accurate, but that's, all that we have in front of us. The data that was presented around that technology through not just Pfizer, but all the different companies involved. Self-amplifying was one of the first elements, it seems, that they created, produced, strove toward. Then the original BNT12B2, I remembered it. I think that's correct. The Pfizer shot, there was two of them, the ones they primarily went forward with. One of those, the main one they used, was in fact listed as self-amplifying on one of the earliest Pfizer documentation. Now, that's not what they claim now, so that's for you to decide. But I think it's really interesting that this has been something that's swirled around this for a long time. Now, self-spreading is about the conversation of actually having a contagious vaccine, which is what you watched right there in that clip in the opening. That's directly from a massive symposium in Europe this was the US involved. Everybody was involved in that. Right? It was right in the beginning and into the opening of the COVID-19 illusion. And that was something, and that's why I point back to the Insect Allies point, because that is the same thing they applied to the Insect Allies conversation before all this through DARPA. So you see, this has been swirling around a long time. My point in saying all of this is that I believe, which is what I argued on the 8th when I first saw that clip, as well as the universal vaccine overlap that has now been deleted. We'll touch on that today. I believe that this was what we were seeing. This was always, if not always, now the direction, and this is what they're pivoting into. So as I almost called it a bait and switch, it almost feels like now that's more accurate, that it's not just a sleight of hand. It's that they, in fact, were telling you, I guess they both apply, but we're getting either going this direction or we're going away from all of this. But in fact, we're actually going deeper into that side of the conversation. And that's in regard to the self-amplifying direction in and of itself. What I was hesitating there for is there's two different directions to go in, as well as that to point out to start is that one, they're not actually stopping mRNA, not even just regular mRNA. I already highlighted this from the HHS post they put out, which I'll show you again. They make it very clear, specifically to manufacturers. Off the top of my head, I think it was Amplitude Therapeutics and Arcturus. I'm forgetting the name exactly. I'll show them when you get there. It's a major company. And actually, I could just look really quickly since I have it all right here in front of me. Arcturus is the name of the company, and they're working on self-amplifying COVID-19 shots, self-amplifying bird flu shots, both of which I've already shown you. One's from April 2025. That's the H5N1 shot. The other one is from September 30th, 2024, both of which are still happening. And both those companies are working on self-amplifying shots, including COVID-19 flu. So that's happening. That's different than what you were told. Secondarily, it lists right there that they're actually continuing mRNA in other fields. Now, maybe you're okay with that. It's not the way it was being framed, and a lot of people in that movement didn't know that and still are being lied to by the screamers at the top of the paradigm. So it's important to understand that this is still happening, and then understand that it seems that as those same things are still happening, they're also pivoting the new direction into further down that hole of self-amplifying RNA. Or SamRNA. So mRNA, same conversation, guys. So we'll talk about that today and where this continues to go and some of the different points that are popping up around it, talking about the RNA in food point at the end, because a lot of people are arguing, which we also discussed around in the last show, whether this is also one of these directions. Not just now, but always have been, but something that they're continuing. And it does appear that other category of mRNA they will continue seems to apply to food. Now, this is not news to people that have been following this since COVID-19 and after. What's interesting is it seems there's so many people out there that just don't want to admit this is happening. And I'm with you. I don't want it to happen. I was hoping that the $500 million removal of mRNA contracts was going to be the beginning of a step in the right direction. But even with this bad direction, that's still a good thing. I'm glad there are less of those out there, but we're just watching this new pivot. And I'm of the mind that that's where it's going to go. That it's going to, and this is, again, my feeling, my point, my gut instinct based on all the facts, that from here forward, all we're going to see is an explosion of self-amplifying shots. Now, again, that's not that hard to predict. We can see that those are in the wings. We can see that that's where they're leaning. So, but again, this is why we tend to point these things out way ahead, demonstrating my value, demonstrating the value of this platform, demonstrating the value of the IMA. Because, the point is, this is why we are consistent. We have different opinions, but we're driven by principle, driven by facts and what we can prove, and not subjective partisan arguments. And so if you follow this platform, you already knew this stuff, just like you knew about the COVID stuff long before most people. So on that note, support this platform, support independent media. But let's get into this. I've got limited time today. I'm going to be interviewing James Corbett tonight, which will be coming out tomorrow, around the whole Give WP data breach conversation, which is really interesting. I wanted to have him on to discuss that as well as some of the surrounding points around where it's going and whether he feels that was sort of targeted and just against people trying to circumvent the normal structure. And or maybe it was set up to do that. We can talk about it tonight. You'll be seeing that tomorrow, but I have a limited time, so let's get into it today. And I'll include his article about this, which is what we'll be discussing tonight, entitled Data Leak at Corbett Report and many other sites. Make sure you check it out. It's really important. It's only 11 minutes. It's worth checking out. And so quickly it has been resolved, but that doesn't mean that there's not more problems to be found. So we have to be, observant. I'm glad somebody found this. Now, a couple opening points I want you to see that I think are, and this one's just I wanted to include, but a couple other points that I think are really interesting, kind of for the same thing we highlighted just there about, what we were discussing recently. Now, I wasn't familiar with the Kobesi letter, simply saying breaking total U.S. debt has officially crossed the $37 trillion, above $37 trillion for the first time in history. You probably already heard this. The point, though, is just to think about what that means where we are now. Now, unless this goes shockingly back down the other direction, then we're clearly not going to be cutting spending costs. Government's going to grow. I'm sure you're already aware of that, but for those that are still holding on to this idea of the golden age, which may be golden age for them and for technocrats and Zionists and globalists, but definitely not for the average person, especially not for the average American, because we're sprinting in the same direction, which if you remember back to what we were saying the last administration before that, what you'll find is the continuation of the same agendas that the government wants to achieve, with different flavors back and forth to kind of bat the thing up and down. But if you look over a long time, it's consistent. That's what James called the steps last time, that basically it's a stepping stone, one administration to the next. There's all things swirling around it, but at the end of the day, it still goes in the same direction. It's worth considering that. And on that same note, this was something we recently put out, and this on the note of winning and not really. Over 100 companies and nonprofits have now signed the White House's pledge to America's youth investing in AI education. Maybe you don't care about that. Maybe you think that's the best thing for everybody. Maybe you love AI. The point is always is that's not what conservatives who put Trump in that position were calling for. If he'd have said that when he was running, they would have booed him like they booed him when he's praised the COVID shot, because that is the opposite of what that aligns with the Great Reset and all the things we were talking about. And again, not about whether you think it's best or not, or whether it is best or not, but simply showing you that's not what they were promised. I think that's an important thing to highlight. I also agree that's the last direction we should be going in. And I put this as sarcasm because it seemed people ask, like, really? You think that's winning? They don't know the work, I guess. But I haven't gone through this. I thought it'd be interesting really quickly that I just wanted to look at what I said about winning. This one I've seen. U.S. FDA approves use of Sanofi's meningitis vaccine in infants. So I said, the winning just won't stop. This is for the podcast, my Twitter account with the different times I've said winning. Oh, this one where Netanyahu is saying he's never been closer to the United States, and he credits that extraordinary achievement to Trump. Oh, here's when Donald Trump said he's praising AstraZeneca's massive $50 billion investment in manufacturing vaccines, mRNA and otherwise, in the United States. I said, this is what winning looks like. Big tech and AI firms are winning under the Trump administration. I'm not sure what I meant by this one. Oh, just the idea that big tech and AI, right? Because that's, again, not what people would have expected. Conservatives, Republicans would have told you that's not what would happen. This one, oh yeah, just making fun of Catherine for saying that. I honestly didn't skim down. I thought it'd be fun to look really quickly. Trump dismisses raising taxes on the rich because a lot of millionaires would leave the country. Hashtag winning. It's like, it just goes on and on. Anyway, you get the point. I just said, call it out, guys. Call it out. When Trump asked about sending weapons to Ukraine, he said, it's everything. It's all of them. It's a full complement. What was that again about the war being over and he wouldn't fund them? On and on and on. Just be honest. That's all we need today, guys. Be honest about what's happening. If you really want it to be positive and change, then be honest about it. Now, we talked about the D.C. point in this last show. Musk and Trump called to federalize Washington, D.C. Now, we went into this in depth about the reality of what D.C. is and why some people want it to be, given statehood for their own, the people that live there who don't get the same, voting rights in particular. But the point is, constitutionally speaking, it's supposed to be Congress has control. And so the interesting overlap of this is Trump coming in with the idea of the executive branch taking power of DC, and then the rumors swirling about him handing it over to Peter Thiel. And it kind of does seem like this is going in that direction. And the conversation of freedom cities and libertarian cities and 15-minute cities, it's all the same thing as far as I'm concerned. I just think it's important to watch this show. But on that note, I thought this was interesting. This is from yesterday. On Monday, a press conference will be held tomorrow at the White House. The White House account writes, which will essentially stop, and this is Trump saying it, stop violent crime in Washington, D.C. It has become one of the most dangerous cities anywhere in the world. That's frankly outlandishly ridiculous, but it says it will soon be one of the safest. Now, look, there's plenty of crime. It's very dangerous, like a lot of places in this country. But to make it only about D.C. is because they have an agenda about D.C. It's pretty simple. Hey, maybe they stop crime while they turn it into a 50-minute city. That doesn't change the fact that it was an agenda. And I think it's easy to see, right? It's important to think about that. But please decide for yourself. And a press conference that will be held at the White House essentially will stop the crime. The press conference apparently will stop all crime. It's not what he really meant, but funny how words mean things. He meant that probably they're going to have a press conference and talks about how they're going to end that. Now, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think it's going to be more police? You think it's, is that what, I guess in some cases conservatives would largely want that, but overall, this is about more authority, more, control of less freedom. Let's put it that way. And that's not what they think they're getting. Honest people are beginning to see where this goes, overlapping with immigration. We'll touch on another show. Plenty of horrifying things continue to happen. And I'll make a point about that after the Israel point about where this seems to be coming from. But overall, not going in the right direction. Breaking 911 says DC police have issued, get this, a juvenile curfew zone ahead of his scheduled press announcement. What is that? Now, something else I just caught wind of is this weird thing happening in, Nova Scotia in Canada, where they're banning people from going into the woods because of fires and stuff. Now, honestly, to be fair, I haven't gone too deep on it. I just kind of saw it as I was researching today. But I honestly don't care about the logic here. If we're talking about a mass ban on people going into public spaces, especially how does that not align with everything we're talking about? Now, maybe it's just coincidental. It's always possible. But I don't think it's actually about fires. At the end of the day, maybe just even top-down control. But really, there's so many other parts to get into which people tend to dismiss, just about what it means to be able to go into nature and what that does to you as a person, your psyche. But overall, Just having a random argument and going, you can't do this today because I said so, right? That's, like it's some kind of decree from, this is not what freedom looks like, guys. And the idea that they can just do that and selectively apply it to certain groups. I mean, can you imagine if this was the Democrats? Same old point. It shouldn't matter as much today, but it does for people that still want to pretend that he's not doing the same thing they've always done with a slightly different slant. So it really does worry me where this goes. Really just think about rationalizing this to build into whatever they're doing there. He says, we're having news conference tomorrow in the White House. I'm going to make our Capitol safer and more beautiful than it ever was before. Always, always, always. Better than best and ever than anyone ever in the world. Make America great again, great again. Whatever they keep doing. It's just so silly. It means nothing. It's just, and where's the tangible outcome? Anyway, the homeless have to move out immediately, which is a weird thing to say. Now, look, same as always. Is somebody there breaking the law? Okay, then apply the law. But the idea, the way that this is going, does not feel like that's what it's about, personally. And it also, you'll see where this personally suggests, and I agree. We will give you places to stay, but far from the Capitol. That's interesting. Okay, if the Biden administration was getting up people that were homeless and saying, we'll give you places to stay, what do you think they would say about that? Socialism! But he does it, and it's good because they should be out of there. Funny how the exact same thing can be framed two different ways because of partisanship. But it says, the criminals, you don't have to move out. We're going to put you in jail where you belong. Oh, and how do you know they're criminals exactly? If they have a criminal record, then sure, put them in jail if they're wanted for a crime. But the idea that they'll just know that, by the way, so, this is the way they apply with immigration. It's somehow this broad thing. They just psychically know who is and who is not a criminal. They don't. They go after people that are brown. And it's coming out left and right now. We'll talk about that in the future. And it says, we're going to put you in jail where you belong. It's all going to happen very fast, just like the border. Exactly. We went from millions pouring into zero, which is not true, in the last few months. This will be easier. Be prepared. There will be no Mr. Nice Guy. Is that what was there before? We went back. We won our capital back. Anyway, there's so many points to make about how weird this is and won our capital. But it says, thank you for your attention on this matter. Now, this person says, and I'm not familiar with, by the time people see see what this really is, it'll be too late. So this is opinion. It says, so the homeless are going to a concentration camp, aka institution, in accordance with a recent Trump executive order, which again, I hate the idea that any of these things actually continue off of him signing a piece of paper sent by himself. This is not the way the country's supposed to work, regardless of the narrative. And now it says the military will be used just like the border and be ready for concussion grenades and how is that not how this will ultimately go? They're not going to want to leave, especially if they're going to go to jail. So imagine, no matter how you agree with this and whether you think this should happen. I'm not even getting into my opinion on it. The point is that don't look at the subject, look at the precedent, look at the outcome, right? What will this allow them to do next time? Maybe with a protest that's in their way and they suddenly rationalize for the same thing. You have to ask about the legalities always. And right now they're rampantly lawless, really just a continued growth of that direction from previous administrations, but it's pretty wild right now. Now, two last points before we get into some hopefully quick points on Israel to then focus on the main part for today. This is what he said recently about, JD Vance was when he was tossed to about the meeting regarding them game planning the Epstein conversation. And remember, they laughed it off like, you're a bunch of stupid conspiracy theorists. Here he said.
Vance hosting a gathering this evening to talk about how to respond to the Epstein situation?
Is he working on what?
Is he hosting some kind of gathering of top advisors this evening to talk about how to respond to the Epstein situation?
I don't know. I could ask you that question. I don't know of it, but I think...
Remember when I pointed out they were laughing before? So what were they laughing at right there? Clearly, this is not an opinion, guys. That shows you they were discussing something about this before. Otherwise, what was funny about that, right? So that showed me, and this is my opinion, that they were praying for that. Like they were ready to discount that because that's what the news said. And it's always good to make the news look bad. Remember how long ago we were talking about that, about wondering if they were, especially Trump's last administration, right? Where they would say something intentionally wrong to get the media to jump at it and then do something different. Now, this is slightly different. Or when the media gets wind of something they don't want you to see, they just change it and pretend like they were never going to do it and go, oh, you're so fake news, which they are, by the way. But this is one of those examples.
Here's the man right here.
I saw it reported today, and it's completely fake news. We're not meeting to talk about the Epstein situation, and I think the reporter who reported it needs to get better sources.
And then they met and talked about the Epstein situation, which is the truth. So here's the interesting breakdown. If I can find my window, there we go. Okay. So J.D. Vance participated in a high-level meeting at the White House to discuss how to address the Epstein scandal after previously denying the meeting would occur. After the meeting was leaked, the meeting was moved to Vance's residence in the White House. Now, the reason I find that interesting to report is because somebody tagged me, and this is why I saw it. Literally, not because I was psychic, but just because I thought this is how silly they are. And that's actually what I said, that they're so binary, they're so basic in the way that they do these things. That's the way they go. They're the junior team. I've been saying that for a while. I said literally exactly what I said was the most likely to be the outcome. Not like this is even that hard to predict anymore, as the U.S. government is so very inept and transparent. So they switch the meeting and go fake news because it's not there anymore. That's laugh worthy. That's insanely small. You know what I mean? Like but that's who these people are. Now, I'm going to jump ahead really quick to the last thing I was going to show you today at the end of the show because it feels relevant and we'll come back to it at the end. David Icke says the dumbest of dumb governments in the UK, the dumbest of dumb governments in the US, the dumbest of dumb governments wherever you look, which I agree with, which right the pause in the point makes you wonder are they in charge? I find it hard to believe. If they were that stupid and inept and clumsy, somebody would do something. Well, okay. And he goes on, coincidence? Not a chance. Dumb people do as their shadow masters tell them. They are too dumb to do anything else. Now, you could change dumb out with greedy, profiteering, or the idea that the shadow masters, you could say lobby, or, whatever it is. The point is there's something clearly going on. And I think we're starting to, as a society, as a world, to start seeing this. Something else is dictating. This has been an old conversation. David Icke's been calling this out for years. Now, you may even disagree, which in some cases I do, about what he thinks is the general point, the larger point. But at the end of the day, we are watching a shocking reality of people that are, too stupid. I shouldn't go. The bottom line is it's clear that they are not good at this right now and are getting caught left and right. And it makes you wonder if even that's the point. But overall, I think somebody else is truly calling the shots. So they lied, got caught. I thought that was interesting, and it shows you what really is happening here in regard to, one, them trying to game plan, which is what it was, the Epstein conversation. So let's try and jam being honest about it and game planning the outcome into the same conversation. Good luck with that. They're lying to you. Now, let's talk about some Israel points. Again, I in a show where I've got more time, I'm going to go through this again, because even though we've been covering this the entire time and long before October 7th with a fine-tooth comb showing you exactly what's happening. Glenn Greenwald, to start off, says a Jewish professor this is a quick point on censorship and where the Trump administration and just the U.S. government is leaning. A Jewish professor of Holocaust studies, a Jewish professor who taught Holocaust studies, may now leave Columbia University because the text like on like her school material that she gave students, that she's always used well before this point in time, includes the Jewish philosopher Hannah Arendt, how do you say that? Arendt, a Jewish philosopher who compared Zionists to Nazis. Rightly so, if you understand even the most basic of things about Zionism trying to work alongside Nazis. Basic and provable fact. You look it up on Wikipedia, guys. And it says, and said Zionism is racist, because it is. It is literally, as even Avi Shalom, a very highly regarded Israeli professor, will tell you, it is racism. Zionism is racism. It's the worst kind of racism. It's apartheid. And has now banned these ideas under the IHRA hate speech code as Trump has forced on universities. So let's take a step back and recognize that what they're doing is not about Jewish anything. It's about Zionism. And in fact, it's now censoring Jewish people who simply have an opinion about, and really not an opinion, have facts to show you about what Zionists don't want you to see. You just can't get any more ridiculous, guys. And this is what they're doing to you. They're censoring Americans based on what Zionists want in a foreign country. And sadly, currently in your government. This is important to understand, because these are lies, guys, in regard to what they're trying to, they're trying to censor the truth. Let's put it that way to make it more clear. And the idea here about Zionists and Nazis, we've gone over this a million times. In fact, here, I'll grab this one. An important one, actually. Damn it. I was going to hope and grab that article that I was saying earlier. There it is. I'll put that down there at the end for later. But so here, Zionism versus Nazism, Israel's connection to extremist ideology, and ADL's history of faking Nazi marches. Now, we've also interviewed people like Dan Cohen, a Jewish person himself, who breaks down the exact same argument. In fact, Dan's the one that showed me how Zionism tried to align itself with Nazi Germany as well as Stalin, because they wanted a fascist entity to maintain their control. And they didn't want to work with the Jews in Europe. They did. I mean, it's just, I don't want to dive. I can go into it forever like we've done in the past. It's so obvious that we're being deceived. So now you're even watching Jewish professors of Holocaust studies being censored by Zionism because it's totally about Jewish history, right? Now, Israel is currently holding, not for the first time, a U.S. citizen. But you're not going to hear your U.S. government care about that because it's not an Israeli U.S. citizen. And that's my opinion. But look at this. A father of a 16-year-old American teenager who is being illegally held in Israeli prison right now. We've seen veterans held from they were on a flotilla. We've seen plenty of these. They don't care, guys. Americans killed in Gaza never got a peep on the corporate media. Have to ask yourself why that is. Netanyahu claims that many leaders agree with Israel in the world, which clearly they do, or they're forced to, but they can't commit to it in front of the country's public opinion. Oh, so we're all racist at this point. Everyone in every country in the world's racist, and the leaders that they pay are the ones that are honest. That makes sense. It says, look, we know you're right, but we can't stand in front of the public opinion in our country and say that's our problem, not your problem. It's obvious what's happening, and they're desperate. On top of that, this is Trump's Gaza negotiator resigns. How many of these do we need to see? Truly exposes that Netanyahu and the U.S. government collapsed the ceasefire, which time he's referring to, who knows? They've done it 50 times. When Hamas was close to agreeing to the deal. Every time they do this, and we've proven it to you every time. Bishra Baba, who secured Eden Alexander's release, says Witkoff adopted Israel's line and completely ignored breakthroughs in the talks. Exactly. Every time. In regard to what's going on with the assassination food lines happening in Gaza, this was actually reported by The Intercept, a lead contractor for security at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is Mossad funded, as Max Blumenthal pointed out, which have become mass killing grounds for starving Palestinians. Johnny Taz Mulford is a member of a Florida chapter of what's called the Infidels, a crusader-inspired motorcycle club opposing the radical jihadist movement. Sort of kind of thing that you see, like the tattoos you see on people like Hegseth. It's the same kind of overlap. That's the mindset they have. The Intercept reported that Mulford, a veteran and private military contractor, was recruited for the job in May. By whom? Mossad? He confirmed that he is currently in Israel, but declined to comment. America first, guys. Now, here is what your current government is saying in front of the United Nations. The world sees this. Everybody everywhere, even major conservative people, are starting to call out the obvious genocide. Even Trump said they're starving people because he's recognizing that he's losing by holding that line. And here's what they're saying in front of everybody. This is what evil looks like in my mind.
It is unfortunate that members have again taken advantage of today's meeting to accuse Israel of genocide. These accusations are politically motivated and categorically false. They are part of a deliberate, cynical propaganda campaign as Hamas attempts to win symbolic victories to compensate for total defeat in war.
As if that was even close to happening. I mean, it's insane. The amount of casual, look at the overlap. Robert's been breaking this down the entire time. They've lost. Now, they've killed a hell of a lot of innocent people, so you could call that a loss in its own right. You should. But in regard to military achievement, Israel lost like they've lost every other time before this against Hamas. Look it up. That's a fact, guys. And it's just wild that they can't even be honest about the basic realities of the military campaign, let alone the genocide that the whole world can see. And everybody with any standing in anything regarding genocide, the Limkin Institute, people, I could go on forever. Holocaust survivors, every human rights group, the IPC, everybody is telling you they're starving people to death and committing genocide. And here she is. Imagine how that person, do you think she's just that stupid, uninformed, or that she just wants power? Because that's what I think right now. That's why I call them the junior team. These are nobody with any respect. Even if they're bad people, they're like, no way. I'm not stepping into that because I know it's obvious. Everyone sees it. I'm not going to step in there and be destroyed. So people like this, who are more interested in having a small bit of power, are willing to make themselves look like monsters. Or she just doesn't see it. My point, though, is that I think that's the kind of person that's pulled into this right now. The junior team that's never had the opportunity.
The United States refutes these allegations entirely. Israel has taken numerous measures to limit harm to civilians and to address humanitarian needs. The loss of civilian life in Gaza is tragic, but the responsibility for this rests with Hamas.
Wow. Hamas, because Hamas has killed them all, right? I just don't even know how you can say that with a straight face. Like, even if you're actually arguing that the tens of thousands that you can prove, it's way more than that have been killed are all just tied to Hamas legs. You realize that still does not change the legality of what they're doing. It just, from day one, we've been saying this. And that's why people like Francesca Albanese have been saying it also. And that's why they're attacking her for it. Oops, I was looking at the, had that open still. All right, so next point on this, just to continue on, just points I don't want you to miss, guys. Syria hasn't stopped. This, honestly, out of everything, even over the ongoing genocide, and especially, and I say that everyone sees that part of it. I can't believe that people aren't talking about Syria. I'm trying to think of an example. It's so obvious because obviously Jolani is a terrorist, Al-Qaeda, that they had on a bounty for his head. They told you he was a terrorist, and then they just put him in a suit, take him, and then publicly take him off the list because he's there. And then they went on to execute everybody they could find. Israel's there doing the same thing, building bases, bombing innocent people. They're raping, murdering, and torturing. They're committing ethnic cleansing. We've shown you 100 different examples and experts on the ground. It's insane to me that we don't talk about this. Not only just they're doing it, and what's interesting is even on top of that, you got Zionists and people in that field, the mainstream alternative media, turning around and going, look, that's what jihadists do. And it's going, well, in this case, you're accurate, but they're the ones hired by Israel and pushed in there. It's not what it appears to be. This is why we point out the Mossad dressing up like these people are funding and arming and creating their own versions of it to blame people like Palestinians. Not to say that there's not people out there that do it of their own accord. The point is that you can't make this out to be a representation of anything other than Israeli and U.S. government actions and the people they fund and support and arm. And as always, they've always funded the worst elements of what they claim they're fighting. It's the easiest thing to prove in the entire conversation. So what you're going to see here quickly is them executing people, doctors in Syria. This is a CCTV video showing the new, quote, democratic Syrian regime executing doctors in Sueda City for being Druze. Right, despite all the claims of how they support the Druze from Israel. Just think it's important to see. I mean, this is what terrorism looks like, guys, and this is what they support. This is what the Israeli U.S. government openly support. It makes me sick. More to come. We'll talk about it. Tammy Bruce, just a long line and a bunch of monster liars. Best known for defending the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. As she literally said, the GHF has been a great success. Imagine saying that. You could argue they're not killed, that it's only Hamas, right? But to say it's been a success, it just shows you how absolutely captured they are. That's crazy. No, what's success at what measure? Maybe success at killing Palestinians. They haven't successfully relayed that much food at all, if any. I mean, it just blows my mind. And reading its statements verbatim is what she was doing amid daily massacres by Israeli forces, which even people at the World Food Program, people that worked there, have told us publicly. Executing them because they're executing them. Will no longer serve as the State Department spokesperson. Isn't it interesting how many people during Trump's reign fall and leave and resign? And I mean, it happens almost every administration, but just like the last time, it's almost unprecedented, if not unprecedented, with Trump in power. I don't know what that shows you, but it's interesting to watch how many people will break away and they act like it's no big deal. So she's leaving, but she's going to the UN. So technically it's a little different than the ones who just leave entirely. But I think it's because nobody wants to be in that horrible position, because your job is to look stupid and lie when everyone knows you're lying. That's what seems to be their job today. And Trump has now named her U.S. Deputy Representative of the United Nations. Oh, great. So she can represent more Zionist interest in the United Nations. Mohammed Safa points out a crane that has been installed by Israel in the aid distribution sites. Apparently, this crane is the technocratic future of the United States. It's killed 1,500 plus people so far, simply waiting for aid, injured 10,000 more. One of the characteristics of the crane is that it's controlled automatically, without human intervention, detecting danger, who knows how, based on probably Palantir AI with the Lavender and Hubsar, but that's what they're doing, on its own and firing on its own. A 25 millimeter machine gun is mounted on it, capable of exploding a person's head. The machine gun is mounted on a crane and is an automatic machine gun, meaning it doesn't fire a single shot, but rather a large volley of bullets. Assuming you need one shot to hit one person, the other shots will hit others behind him. That's why this crane claims the lives of thousands of people. And they shoot these, and again, 2022, Israel testing AI-controlled machine gun systems in Hebron, West Bank. This is not new, and this is just the extension. This is where it goes. Simple point, guys, and we will go over this more in the future, is this is just automatically firing on a bunch of innocent people, as we've heard from the Green Beret, we've heard from the World Food Program. Genocide. And this video, I think, is an important way to connect all of it. And then we're going to get into the rest of the show in regard to self-spreading, self-amplifying RNA in the future therein. But Kerry says, America, be afraid. This isn't stopping at Gaza.
The most chilling thing I've seen responding to these immigration raids. I'm an immigrant rights attorney, and usually I'm a pretty optimistic guy. I don't get scared easily. I love watching horror movies. Over the past 6 months, I've seen some really disturbing stuff. At one location, people hid when I showed up, and I still found them using a thermal drone that detects body heat. Where was this technology first tested? By Israel in occupied Palestine. When people get taken by ICE, they often refuse to say their names. So ICE identifies them using a facial recognition technology. Where was this tech first used? By Israel in occupied Palestine.
Surprise,
when people
surprise.
refuse to let ICE search their phones, ICE will plug their phones into this box and it unlocks their phone. Where was this tech first used? By Israel in occupied Palestine.
Guys, that's
the
insane.
amount of dystopian tech that the US government has taken from Israel to use in its own country is terrifying. And this is why freeing Palestine and abolishing ICE goes hand in hand.
小红书
I thought I had, I guess I don't have it anymore. I've got a video, or I've played a video, but you guys know this, but I was hoping I had it offhand, of where you have Israelis at these international weapons sales, which is just weapons trafficking, but it's okay because they sell to governments, though, who kill far more people than anybody in the world. But that's the good stuff. The point is, they call it battle tested. Things they use on Palestinians, from little cans that explode in children's hands to massive weapons they don't want you to know about, they test them on Palestinians and then they sell them as battle tested. Not a joke. And so his point, guys, is that is what all this comes from. We have ICE right now, which I was going to include, but I'm glad I didn't. I want to make sure I have enough time. Ultimately, ICE is, this is the Gestapo at this point, guys. And I know it's such a buzz thing for people right now. It is the most obvious overlap. What they're doing is unconstitutional. It's illegal. There's no warrant. Their faces are covered. They're not identifying themselves. And they're going after U.S. citizens. I've already shown you, an endless amount of examples of U.S. citizens getting arrested. And we have children that have been deported. It's just, on top of it, they keep telling you that they're going to be focusing on Americans. But all that they're using, whether it's immigrants or not, that's my point of the other point we just made. It's going to expand. These are pointed inward. There are tools ICE is using in the United States, in many cases against Americans, whether or not they arrest them, that were developed against Palestinians in Gaza, that were paid for by your tax dollars, probably entirely, that are now being used against you in this dystopian, technocratic future they're building. I mean, it's everything we're talking about. I mean, think about this. Palantir said the same thing. I mean, how do you think they're scanning? The only way they can effectively do what they claim they're doing is to look at everybody. It's not hard to recognize. And now that's where you live. I mean, it couldn't be more clear. Now, we're going to come back on that more as we go forward. But I want to make sure we get to this today because this is the main thing I want to make sure we discuss. And we just talked about this as well on the 8th when this came out. Trump admin's mRNA sleight of hand, the long-planned universal vaccine. It has. I mean, we played the clip of Fauci. We've seen Rick Bright do the same. We've seen it is clear that this has been a long-term plan that they're excited about. And now the RFK Jr. team is rolling it out. And that's where it gets more interesting about what that overlaps with. But first, I want to make sure if you didn't see yesterday's show, just give you the quick understanding of what we're talking about here. Now, the main point, I guess the first thing to highlight is they came out and said, canceling $500 million in mRNA contracts. Well, they didn't really do that. What they came out and did is say they're going to cancel. Well, I shouldn't say it like that. It's all the point. I've yet to see all 22 they claim they canceled. So until I see that, and until I see what's actually being canceled, then I as always, we should wait to see it. But they claimed, and I do feel like that in some way was happening, but we shouldn't assume that either. The point is they put that forward, and then on the document they shared, it says HHS winds down mRNA vaccine development under BARDA. And by the way, under BARDA. Not every single thing they do is under BARDA. While some final stage contracts, so again, this they said we're winding down mRNA. Now, most everybody who reported this, they quoted this first sentence. They weirdly left out this part. I'll tell you why, and then left out this bottom line. And sadly, so many title skimmers out there, even people who are honest, didn't know about this. It says, while some final stage contracts, Arcturus and Amplitude, I did get it right, will be allowed to run their course because money's invested. Well, okay, then why did you cancel the Moderna shot that had been started well before in Biden's administration? Same argument, right? It doesn't. There's no logic there. Okay, but regardless, I don't think it's about that. I think that's the narrative they're using to make you go, well, because the people that support him will go, you can't just waste the money, even though they would if it was the other side, right? As always. The point is, both Arcturus and Amplitude are working on self-amplifying shots that include mRNA. And that's the first indication I got. It's okay, then it's weird that they would go, we're ending all these, but we're focusing on the ones that I always kind of thought was where it was going to go. So it seems obvious. Then it says down here, other uses of the mRNA technology within the department are not impacted by this announcement. That includes food, but plenty of other things we probably don't even know about. So mRNA is not even, let me put it this way, mRNA technology, not even close to going away. What they did is cancel specific mRNA contracts while not even stopping mRNA shots in many cases. And then also continuing the technology direction, which, by the way, you know their game with language. Suddenly they make a new gene therapy mRNA and they go, that's not a shot anymore. Now it's gene therapy when it's the exact same thing. You know, my point is there's ways they go around it when you can see right in the way they wrote this that it's not being presented properly. Also point out the 22 projects they claim they're canceling worth $500 million. Okay, so that will be relevant in a second. So that's the first part. Clearly that's being misrepresented. Now, here are the projects that I'm mentioning from Arcturus. The H5N1 self-amplifying shot. That's what this is right here. Self-amplifying mRNA. And then SamRNA. Not always with the dash right there, but same point when it's either just Sam or SA-mRNA. The point is that's one of the ones that are around bird flu, which is now what their universal platform is supposed to work for flu, bird flu, COVID, all of it. So they are still making COVID shots, even in that. This one, I mean, technically that would be a confusing way to say it, but the one they're making would include COVID within the shot they're making, but still, again, continuing these other COVID shots, mRNA included. This is the one from September 30th, 2024, self-amplifying mRNA COVID shot, Arcturus. So that one is continuing. So not only just self-amplifying, not only just mRNA, but COVID-19 shot included. That seems like a lie, like a very poorly crafted, small deception that that anybody that looked would have seen right through. Weird. Now, this got deleted, or something they put out about this. It's all in my head. I'm sorry. I'm trying to do it quickly for those that, if you saw the last show, you know where this goes. They came out with this tweet. Maha Action. It says, RFK Jr., we're developing a universal vaccine at NIH, which is a vaccine that addresses the entire phylum of viruses. It's a vaccine that mimics natural immunity, and it is effective against any kind of mutation. We believe it's going to be effective. Now, they deleted this tweet. I didn't know that till today. I was on What is Truth podcast. It might be out already. I'm not sure. I think it was live. Good guy. Enjoyed talking to him. He brought this up. I hadn't seen it yet. And we watched it on the show. And so they deleted this, which I find really interesting, which we'll play for you. But Luther simply says, why did Kennedy delete his tweet about developing a universal vaccine? Grok, his screenshot, I can't verify that Grok said that, but it was deleted from that account. TrueStream Media, we showed you this in the last show. They had captioned it, right? And there's the link if you want to try to find it. I wasn't able to find it anywhere, like on the way back machine, but I do have the clip. Simply showing you, it says RFK Jr. told everyone straight up what his job at HHS secretary is to restore trust in the vaccine program. That's where he is. So we're going to play this real quickly just so you can see it again because it was deleted. But then we're going to talk about the overlap of this new universal platform and what it is, which we showed you on the 8th, right? Josh Walkos did kind of a deep dive on this in particular, which you'll find very interesting, where the funding comes from and some stuff that I had planned to go deeper into, which is the actual documentation of it, which I haven't seen really anybody do yet, but we'll go into that. But the point, before you miss it, before we go beyond it, is simply that we were deceived about what this was. And I think it's very clear now, as we'll go into more in this next part of the segment, that the self-amplifying direction is clearly what they're pivoting into, and others that I'm worried about. But where were we? Here, we'll play the clip and then we'll go through the platform.
Now we're developing a universal vaccine at NIH, which is a vaccine that addresses the entire phylum of viruses. And so it's a vaccine that mimics natural immunity. And it...
Well, but wait, I thought natural immunity was a conspiracy. Now, obviously, he knows that he's been one of the few that have always told you natural immunity is important. Interesting, though, right? For many, even people sitting around him, people at the NIH who have told you before that natural immunity is, it's just weird how these things pivot around, isn't it?
And it is effective against any kind of mutation. So it doesn't drive the virus to mutate. And it could be effective. We believe it's going to be effective against not only coronaviruses, but also flu. And it's going to be a much safer and much more effective vaccine.
Okay. Why would you delete that? Genuinely, that seems like, other than the fact that it was unpopular, which shows you that they're really clearly trying to cultivate how everything looks, which doesn't seem honest at all to me. Now, HHS, NIH launched next generation universal vaccine platform. This was the May 1st one I showed you a while back. Remember, we showed you this in May. I think May 4th, we showed you this way back before this was a big topic. Yet again, you would have known about this well before the social media conversation if you watched this platform. And there's plenty of other independent media, I argue, are doing the same thing. Now, it says the initiative represents a decisive shift toward transparency, effectiveness, clearly, and comprehensive preparedness. Is that, preparedness is always one of those words. Funding the NIH in-house development of universal influenza and coronavirus vaccines. Now, to be clear, this hasn't happened yet. Now, they have these two they're working on, both of which are something. But the point is that the way that lists almost sounds like they may end up just making universal COVID shots and universal flu shots, which is one of the variations of what they're discussing. But they include candidates, as we told you on the 8th, BPL 1357 and BPL 24910. So that is important to understand because of what these things are, as we'll go into next. Before we get to that, this was the one that Josh Walko shared just to show you on the NIH as well. It's called the beta propiolactone inactivated whole virus platform, which we went over, right? They argue they have a lot more side effects. I still argue that even the whole virus old version of these are less than we've seen from mRNA. But also, it's the ones that people have argued, and they call it a conspiracy theory about whether you can get sick from them. They say it's in fact inactivated, but there's clear evidence that's not always, whether they fail at that part of it or whether that's not that it doesn't work. So interesting to see. We're going back to this. But my mind on this, again, not forgetting that they're not stopping mRNA, this whole thing may be a head fake. But if it's not, it's interesting that we're seeing this new direction in regard to using the old technology, which maybe this whole thing is about, look at it like this. This in and of itself is still an experimental step. I don't know why we're okay with that with what we just went through, but it gets more interesting than this. Now, before we go to Josh Walko's post, this is what I wanted to read from you from the May 13th post about this, which sets a couple of important points you might have not seen. Trump administration's universal flu vaccine project puzzles scientists. You see, it was very public, just weirdly doesn't get a lot of attention in certain fields. People against other respiratory viruses that could cause a pandemic, such as bird flu, coronaviruses, just showing that they're doing this toward stopping these things, which a lot of people don't even feel, there's a lot of varying opinions in the partisan side that very statement alone would cause them a problem. That's why I'm always trying to point that out. But it says, quote, "I'm glad to see that this administration is still wanting to invest in developing next generation influenza vaccines and respiratory vaccines in general." And not what a lot of MAHA people would have wanted. First of all, it says the project plans to use an approach that would involve injecting people with a whole flu virus that's been killed with a chemical to render it harmless, which there's a whole, if this fully becomes real, and is being given out, we'll probably go over that point also about that process and what there's also points to be made about that. But it says, but is still capable of stimulating the immune system. Most vaccine experts consider the whole virus approach to be antiquated. Now it says, and then there's the price tag, $500 million. Right. So they stopped funding for $500 million for 22 different random projects and then just pivoted that $500 million right back into COVID-19 flu shots or universal for both. So let's recognize, one, they didn't stop spending anywhere. And that's the case of the larger point, too, that they're spending way more than even previous administrations. But on top of that, that it just seems they just reorganized and they're still making both mRNA from before, mRNA projects, and still then putting that money back into things that are experimental and COVID-19 flu related. Just feels like sort of a manipulation, doesn't it? Now, other aspects that are, it goes on to say, especially at a time when the health research funding has been slashed, the money was originally earmarked. Yeah, so that very money was earmarked for COVID-19 next generation shots. So they're doing what was supposed to be done with it. Another aspect that's raising eyebrows is the fact that the technology called a beta propiolactone inactivated whole virus platform was developed, and this is important to me, by two NIH scientists, Dr. Matthew Mamoli and Dr. Jeffrey Taubenberger. Now, this is the same thing we talked about last time with the patents, which we went over in the last show. That was a big deal with Fauci and people he worked with having financial investments in, that's the same difference here. And not only that, Taubenberger was recently named acting director of NIAID, and Taubenberger holds a patent on the technology, just like before. In addition, the strategy was picked without independent public review and based on very limited preliminary testing. How in the world does that feel better than everything else we've gone through? It feels like the same old thing, in almost every single way. And, people that have already worked under Fauci. I don't know why that doesn't alarm the very people that are most on guard about this conversation. And it says the BPL platform is fully government owned and NIH developed. Doesn't make me feel any better. This approach ensures radical transparency. Really? Because they're typically radically transparent and they're not doing that now. No, that's important to get off to show you guys. Now, one more thing is just this. I just saw this when I was going through other work. Don't forget this. This is from one of these major studies we showed you. So they're still, guys, making things toward COVID-19 or the flu, which is, if we understand now, of course they locked this down. Oh, wait. Okay, good. I was going to say, I thought they had a paywall. Is that we know the reality of this, right? This is, as far as I can tell, the last standing, this is the most relevant, the body of evidence. It's done by the Ioannidis group. And the point is, at a global level, before vaccinations were given, the infection fatality rate may have been as low as 0.03% and 0.07% for under 59 years old. Well less than the flu. And then, so 0.03% for under 59 and 0.07 for 69. That's shockingly less than the flu. And the best part here, the most alarming, 94% of the entire population of the world is within that category. So they lied to you. This thing was less than the flu from day one. We know that because Imperial College lied to us, and we can prove that. They used their own that's what they're paid for, in my opinion, or at least specifically Neil, what was his name? I'm forgetting his name now. But anyway, the point, it was never dangerous, at least not in the case the way they framed it. And it's the flu, it's the same thing. We're always being scared into these things. So realize this is the science. They're claiming to follow the science, or just the body of evidence of the scientific work shows you this if you look across all of it. And they're still telling you need shots for it. I think that's worth pointing out. Now, Champagne Josh here, Josh Walkos came out with this. This is on the 8th. That new universal vaccine RFK Jr. was just touting? It's called BPL 1357, a beta propiolactone inactivated whole virus universal influenza vaccine developed in-house at NIAID, but you'll never guess who's funding its production. Specifically, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation overlap with somebody else. I'll show you that right now. So here's the document. You can check it out for yourself. Actually, I should download this on the TLAV server in case this disappears. But here's the point he was showing, by the way. Shout out to Josh Walkos. Good work. And this is the post he was showing right here. Here it is, screenshotted. Preclinical development at good manufacturing practice and good manufacturing practice production of the vaccine have been facilitated by a gift fund from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to NIAID. Great. So it seems Bill Gates is working with the people that have patents on this work, and they're remember when Trump met Bill Gates and he said they had a great meeting about the future of vaccines? Yeah. But people don't want to talk about that because Bill Gates will be in prison. Just wait, right? Save him for last, or whatever Q is saying. The reality is, guys, you're being played. They're working with exactly who they told you was the biggest enemy. And whether it's Gates or whoever you think. I'm not even suggesting, I do very much think that. We did a whole thing about the about Bill Gates and this connection to all these things. James Corbett did the same thing. I mean, it's this fake philanthropy. It's a very big deal, but he got like overexposed, I think, and he sort of stepped back, but he's still involved in all this. Now, to be clear, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is not just Bill Gates or necessarily even involving him, but it's very clear to me this is what he's been doing. And Donald Trump and Bill Gates met about the future of this, and he said it. He basically told you this is where it was going. So the reality is, on top of everything else, you now have another thing overlap with Bill Gates and the Trump administration. Now it says the BPL 1357 contains 4 different low pathogenicity avian influenza A viruses. Each has a different hemagglutinin and neuraminidase, I'm probably mispronouncing that, subtype. The Data and Safety Monitoring Board on the BPL 1357 phase 1 trial is right here. That's where we got the link from for you. Now it says one more thing. The National Toxicology Program lists BPL as reasonably anticipated to be a human carcinogen. Nothing new there. Seems like everything they do is like that. Where was that? Oh, there it is. Reasonably anticipated to be a human carcinogen, which, by the way, in most cases means it really is, and we know it'll probably hurt you. There's things out there that we know are shockingly dangerous in that very regard, and they still go potentially carcinogenic, because of moneyed interest and so on. Well, maybe not. Question everything, but my point is that typically when you see it, that it just gets rested in that place. And so it's a smaller point in the larger conversation, but this shows you that it's not something. It's more dangerous in different ways. Goes on to say, here's a screenshot of the post that was deleted after backlash, along with the announcement for the universal flu platform that uses this. And here's the post we showed you. There's the clip he shared. Thank you for that. And he says a working link to the aforementioned next generation vaccine, which we just showed you. So I think it's really important not only that this is direct tied to Bill Gates, but the overarching point in all this is that it's just the continuation of the same kind of direction, whether or not mRNA. It's worth wondering, it's worth considering what the real point of all that was. It's sort of like the point they make with the partisanship. You could make it about the fact they really want you to use proper pronouns, or you could recognize that that was just a means to an end for control, for influence, for censorship, for any number of things. And you can see it doing the same thing from the right, if you're actually paying attention. Now here, I went through this a little bit. Again, you can find this in the show notes. Here's the one he showed you. But as always, what have we looked for in the past? And this is really preliminary, guys. When this actually is something that they're selling as a product, we'll do it again. But here's what it says. Risks of specifically BPL 1357. The risks for administration of BPL 1357 are not well known. Fantastic. But again, that's something that will they claim, flush out during the research. But isn't it funny how that's the same thing we got when they put out the Pfizer shots? And it says, as an inactivated influenza vaccine, the risks are presumably similar to other inactivated. Oh, good. I'm sure we can assume all the way to being sold and put in your arm. But, important to point that out, as well as the fact that the effectiveness of BPL 1357 on pregnant women or the developing human fetus are unknown. I'm going to bet you it ends up that way. Now, that's not as crazy as it may sound, because in historical points, you're not supposed to test on them because it's dangerous for them, right? And so, but my point would be, if you don't, then you can never market it to pregnant women. You can't say, look, we know it's safe and effective for pregnant women. Get your flu shot at the same time. All the stuff they did during COVID-19 lie. The point is, if you're not going to test on them, which they rarely do, then you damn well better make it clear that we don't know. Especially, we almost say you shouldn't take this because it could be dangerous, could kill your baby. We don't know because we didn't test it on you. We've gone over this a million times. Let me see if that even pops up. It's been a long time since I've searched for it. Oh, maybe it did. Look at that. This is from After Hours Live back then. How can the COVID jab, bivalent and original, be recommended as safe for pregnant and breastfeeding women when the most current official documents on the jabs shows that they don't know if it's safe? It's the same thing. No data available on pregnancy. And they not only did they sell it, they told you should take, and then get your flu shot right next to it. Same point there. The point was that I don't want to grab that one too. That same thing. You look it up. They don't know. They didn't test them alongside of the vaccines. This happens every time, man. And you would hope that RFK would be the different one, but it doesn't appear so. But let's wait and see. But so far we already see that. But the next one may be different. Now this is interesting. Iratagone, probably mispronouncing that, however you say that name, says this is what's really going on. They ban, in quotes, which I agree with the framing right now, 22 mRNA jabs. Meanwhile, 400 self-amplifying RNA jabs are in the process of being patented under the guise of treatment for cancer. Yeah, like the Stargate platform. Who didn't see that coming? It's worse than your run-of-the-mill mRNA. Because my point at the time was, how in the world are we going to think they're going to pull back a $500 billion Stargate platform involving Oracle and Larry Ellison and SoftBank and OpenAI and all the different things, and then just yank it back because he decides they don't like it that day? Which I don't even think they really mean, guys. Clearly, we can see that. So now it starts to make more sense. That's just my opinion. Well, the facts do show us this is where they're pivoting, but I don't know about Stargate yet. But how does that not fill in the blank? I think that's where this goes, especially with all she's pointing to, and I'll show you the link. It's worse than your run-of-the-mill mRNA. I agree with that. So here's I looked this up and I said, what a weird page. And it just says it's called the SamRNA Research Foundation. Very little information. There's really nothing else to find on here. And so I was like, what is this? Where is this coming from? And so I asked Grok, which I very rarely am doing anymore, but I was in a rush, and ultimately I feel like I'd have more weight for people on this. And it says, the SamRNA Research Foundation, also referred to the SamRNA Co. Limited, is a privately owned company focused on developing self-amplifying mRNA technologies. Now, the names don't ring a bell, but if they do for you, let me know what you think. Founded by Dr. Shi-Lung Lin, Chief Scientist Consultant, and Dr. Jeffrey Hung, Business Manager. Now, whether the Chinese names mean something more to you or not, I mean, it certainly, to me, it depends on what's happening, right? Let's remember, from the origin point, this was both China, United States together, at least in the research that took place before all of this, whatever you think actually happened. Now, potential supporters in the field, it says, while not directly linked to the SamRNA Research Foundation, other organizations in the SamRNA space, such as Arcturus Therapeutics and Gritstone Bio, have received support from entities like BARDA, which we were talking about, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So there you have it, tying back to Arcturus and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is another swing into all of this, which shouldn't surprise you, seeing as how that's the platform we just talked about, the universal platform, that he is, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation gave a special fund to, but the Arcturus was the ones from before, one from the Biden administration into today, and one since then from Trump's administration. It shouldn't be surprising that Bill Gates is connected to them. Then it goes on to say, for instance, BARDA awarded Gritstone Bio a $433 million contract for a phase 2 study of a SamRNA vaccine. And the Gates Foundation has backed Arcturus Therapeutics for H5N1 SamRNA, which again points that out. So Bill Gates backing one of the ones RFK Jr. and Trump are still continuing. On top of that, BARDA is awarded almost $500 million for a study on another SamRNA self-amplifying shot. I think it's becoming very clear that this is the direction they're going in, which is exactly what I was expecting, but we'll wait to see what happens tomorrow. Now, Dr. McCullough, on the note of that, this was back from May 31st of this year. New study, COVID-19 replicon SamRNA injections induced, surprise, surprise, severe blood abnormalities in 93% of trial participants. So look, this is specific in this one, the COVID-19 replicon SamRNA injections. The point, though, guys, is he's talked about this. I've talked about this, where this is going, and what they're now currently pushing forward as the focal point is just as bad, if not shockingly worse. You know, think of it like CBDCs are bad, but don't worry, we've got the stablecoin version, and finding out that's way worse. It's what they're doing everywhere. Steve calls them the bait and switch administration. He says this may be the most acutely toxic COVID-19 vaccine thus far. Lipid nano, it's LNP, nCoV, SARNA, O2 vaccine, self-amplifying. It's just they're trying this everywhere. This is the direction, and now they're all rushing to get there. Recognize. And oh, look, he's talking about the self-amplifying mRNA injection trial in Uganda. 93% had severe blood. That's what he's pointing to. 85% experienced systemic symptoms, fever, vomiting. 85%. They love to pass that off as normal. Hardly. Thrombocytopenia, same things. The McCullough Foundation put this out. Self-amplifying mRNA, that's what the replicon is implying. Oh, you know, and I should see, again, these are things that I've talked about so many times. The simple way to look at this, and again, I'm not a expert, but I'm pretty well versed on this stuff. I've interviewed McCullough many, many, many times. I've been doing this work around this topics before COVID-19, but much during that time frame. Self-amplifying, you could think about it like, see, this is my point about the Pfizer shot and having the original one listed as self-amplifying, and what they tell you, no, it gives you one spike protein. It goes in the muscle, one time and it's over, right? Well, what did we find out? Nope, not even close. It continues to make spike protein going on seemingly indefinitely. We just covered that recently. We have studies all over the place where it says, I mean, I could bring up the Red Cross point again. I love bringing that up just really quickly for you to, because the studies are attached to that. So I called the Red Cross out, if you haven't seen that, where they literally back in 2022 said, we don't label blood as vax versus unvax because it doesn't enter the bloodstream from the COVID shot. And I just said, here's yet another peer-reviewed study that finds that you're wrong. SARS-CoV-2 spike protein vaccine sequences circulate, spike mRNA vaccine sequences circulate the blood up to 28 days after. And then here's another one, same thing, and another one, same thing. And the point is, we can see today that some people are still producing spike proteins. You know why? Because that's what a self-amplifying shot looks like, at least in part. And so these are what we're dealing with. Something that continues to pump these things out as if that's somehow what we want. Now, the argument is if you're making a universal shot, right? It can keep pumping out the thing that applies to everything all the time and you'll never get sick again for the rest of your life. Sure. Color me skeptical. US FDA fast-tracked Gates BARDA self-funded self-amplifying bird flu shot, Arcturus. That's what we just talked about. Here's another Arcturus. Look at that. Here's another Arcturus. Look at that. Here's another Arcturus. Look at that. Here's, this is a different one. So look at this. 4 out of the 5 self-amplifying shots that Dr. McCullough or the Peter McCullough Foundation is pointing to as coming are self-amplifying made by Arcturus. So we go back to the point of what they're telling you and they say, don't worry, we're winding them all down except for some final stage that will continue to run their course. Now, Arcturus is not the name of a shot, guys. It's the name of a company making shots. And that's the point. They're still making these and they're leaning in heavily to self-amplifying shots. That's where this is going. It says there are currently at least 33 replicon mRNA injection candidates in development. It's becoming abundantly clear that the pharmaceutical industry and captured regulatory agencies have zero regard for the massive safety concerns of undefined synthetic mRNA replication resulting in uncontrolled toxic antigen production. It's exactly what we've been talking about the entire time. On top of that, let's not forget, peer-reviewed science finds mod RNA injections cause cancer. Oh, this is the wrong one, actually. Here. I was doing it quickly earlier. This one. This one? Well, I'll include this one too. Now, the point was we made a very clear point about the modified RNA. That's the whole point, right? They tried to tell you it was mRNA. It wasn't. N1-methyl pseudouridine modified RNA, which is one of the major reasons it was really hurting people. And so my point is they're just continuing down that path. And so it's the modified, the manipulation, the genetic editing, the process. And so all they're really doing is just trying to continue, like to edit, to modify this in a point to where it's hurting you in the same way. They're not really shifting that, maybe in slight differentiations of the modification, but then keep and making it to where it will produce even more. Here's a clip that McCullough Foundation included.
I have major concerns, particularly about these new self-amplifying replicon injections, in which that was just approved for adults 18 years and older in the European Union, as well as in Japan a few years ago. And now they're trialing them here in America by Arcturus Therapeutics, funded by the Gates Foundation, as well as BARDA. And so they're developing these. And the problem with self-amplifying mRNA is it basically acts like a virus in your body. It gets in there and starts to self-replicate, and you're going to have massive antigen production, toxic antigen production. Who knows how long it's going to replicate for? Who knows if it's going to shed? And it's just an absolute disaster, and it risks a permanent damage to populations. They have to be stopped.
I agree. So now's the time to play this clip again that we started with, but recognize that that's where the overlap comes in, guys. That's what this has always been. And this has been one more effort to jam this into your life. It doesn't seem to be going away. It just gets stronger regardless of the administration.
COVID-19. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, the word virus has been dominating media headlines as well as our daily lives. Did you know that one approach that has been proposed to control virally transmitted diseases is by releasing a virally transmitted vaccine? Unlike traditional vaccines, infectious vaccines do not require any individual consent.
for the podcast, it's showing a woman on a couch touching a child, a pregnant woman, and then these little virus things that look just like the COVID virus or whatever you want to think that is, are all floating around and going into their bodies. And then from the pregnant woman into another child. No informed consent. Almost kind of sounds like they're happy about that.
Infectious solutions are also being developed for food and agriculture and are currently making their way through the regulatory approval process.
Many of which are literally in your lives right now, guys.
However, do we really want to intentionally disperse these modified viruses outside the lab?
Too late.
Is this a forward march of science or a mistake? Join our live event at the 2020 Euroscience Open Forum.
2020, September 2nd to 6th. Involved a hell of a lot of people. The point is, guys, this was where it was going. Sort of feels like an Event 201-y kind of thing. The point is, it's always been the aim. They very clearly are going this direction. So, this is the article, one of them anyway, from the Free Thought Project. Scientists accuse DARPA of genetically modifying insects for bioweapon to spread agricultural viruses. Okay, that is literally what this is. Here's just one of the articles that covers the same thing. Scathing report accuses the Pentagon of developing an agricultural bioweapon. Now, they pushed back, they pulled back on this. There was scientists right there. Insect allies. I got to save this one for future just so I can bring up the... Here's DARPA. Insect allies. They claim this is about helping crops. Scientists around the world signed a thing that said, stop this. It's a dual weapon, a dual-use weapon. And they pulled back. The reality, though, is that they didn't stop. Obviously, you see that. And so when this is just coming at you from a different angle. That's all it really comes down to. Now, the food aspect is still part of this as well. If we're really thinking about the multifaceted effort, then think about the idea that, and it's everywhere, in my opinion, the many different ways. And it's not just about getting this in your body. There's more going on around that. But one of the worries, at the very least, is that that's the objective. And so if that is the case, if you think that's the focus, recognize this stuff is actually happening. Sherry Tenpenny says they're moving the vaccine agenda from the clinic to the farm. RNA vaccines, in quotes, are now being sprayed onto crops, reprogramming plants in real time. No labels, no long-term safety, no consent. And that's what we're just showing you. And once it's in the food chain, there's no taking it back, which is sadly kind of where I think it already is. But here's her post. Her Substack, which you should follow. Oh, no. Oh, damn it. Oh, good. See? And that's why I take screenshots. I was just going to like it. I hit the wrong one. So it's called Dr. Tenpenny, Eye on the Evidence, RNA Vaccines in Your Food. The next phase of the global genetic experiment, August 9th. So she writes, the government, has already given permission to spray a new synthetic RNA pesticide directly onto crops. This isn't science fiction. It's already been used for experimental use. This is not new at all. This is the post. EPA registers novel pesticide technology for potato crops. December 22nd, 2023. Still being used today. It says the EPA approved the first RNA-based spray on application, green light spray called Leadprona in 2023. Leadprona is a sprayable double-stranded dsRNA product that targets the Colorado potato beetle. According to the EPA, or at least that's the framing of what, this is the justification for the experiment. According to the EPA, Leadprona is a new type of pesticide that relies on an inborn mechanism used by plants and animals to protect against disease called RNA, RNA interference. We've talked about this too, RNAi. Now it says in May 2023, the EPA approved an experimental use permit under the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act. How many times we talked about that? To test it on 318 acres across 10 different states. Great, so you were part of the experiment, whether you knew it or not. The trial evaluated the new insecticide's ability to kill the beetle, which is known to rapidly develop resistance to chemical-based insecticides. So on a quick side note, let's remember, we've talked about this plenty. There's one of the many shows, which you'll probably enjoy watching if you want to hear more about that and the overlapping problems and the lie around a lot of it. Obligatory pesticide spraying in New York City, GM mosquitoes, and flying vaccinators. Are they all connected? All of which are very provable and real. On top of that, this is one of the posts that I've shared from that show, but also just talking about this, about how what they did in their practice allowed 15%, give or take, of these mosquitoes to bypass what they did, which then gave them the mutation to be resistant to it. Then they bred and it continued. And then now we're at a point where this isn't working anymore. And they've just created an army of massive resistant GM mosquitoes. And it's the same kind of thing. And this one was the point that I'm making for the point there. When they tested these mosquitoes, they did it to you. Experimental use permit amended to allow releases of specifically the OX5034, which is what Gates is involved in Florida, California, also Texas, plenty of other places. My point is to show you on March 22nd or 6th, 2022, they amended an ongoing experimental permit to drop these over your head. So as I said, and seemed to get very little attention, are you aware that the GM mosquitoes released in California and Florida and elsewhere are an ongoing experiment? Are you okay with that? Considering that there is provable DNA contamination and that 3 to 15% do not die as designed, but actually get stronger and then spread. And here we are. Same point, right? It's exactly what she's talking about. Experimental use permit. So if you're in those states, you should be outraged that you're being used as a test subject. Now, it says in October 2023, the EPA issued a final rule under 40 CFR Part 180, establishing a temporary tolerance exemption. Sure, you got told about that, right? That allows the residue to remain on a potato, saying, quote, this regulation eliminates the need to establish a maximum permissible level of residue of lid prona when used in accordance with this exemption. Right. So the very fact that we just don't have a limit makes it okay to leave residue on there. That lines up, right? Sounds like they're just going, well, if we don't set a limit, we don't have to care. Kind of feels that way. Now it says nothing was written or observed about the fish or birds that eat beetles being exposed or killed by the insecticide. That's a major part of what I go into in this, as well as the one I talk about here in regard to, maybe it's not linked here. I did one also about these edible vaccines. There it is. Same thing. It overlaps a lot with the same conversation. We talk about these edible vaccines that were dropped for animals. Same thing. Edible transmissible live rabies vaccines airdropped over U.S. that include tetracycline. You know, the same tetracycline, if you're following these stories that I talk about right here, which is what's giving these mosquitoes the ability to circumvent the trap, right? So they use tetracycline over here, knowing that it actually is making, I think that's by design, quite frankly. The point is that they don't care about the animals that are being hurt or the domestic dogs and cats and or the spraying, which kills the other bugs that might kill those mosquitoes. And and this has been going on for years. People, experts on the topic, are telling you what you're doing is actually causing the problem, probably by design, guys. But it says, or what happens to the mammals that eat the fish or the birds that have eaten the dsRNA exposed beetles? How long have they observed for evidence or harm? They're doing that right now. They claim that's the experiment being tested on you and your kids and your family and the animals in your environment. Safe and effective, right? The EPA will reevaluate the environmental impact on the plants and local pollinators in 3 years. By that time, she writes, the genie will be out of the bottle, never to return if adverse effects are discovered or occur within the Earth's microbiome. Probably by design. Continuing, she says, in 2021, the biotech startup Tarana Biosciences was founded after an initial funding round of $50 million invested by Flagship Pioneering, the same investors behind Moderna. Flagship Pioneering describes itself as a bioplatform innovation company. It defines the new RNA-based products this way: developing targeted products designed to work at any time in a plant's life cycle, enabling a continuous product pipeline that is adaptive and responsive to variable climate conditions. This is what I was talking about so long ago in the conversation of Prairie City Inc. and the group that Canada gave the rights to make GMO cannabis. Way back then, they were working on putting pharmaceuticals in plants. Now this is just so far beyond this, it's terrifying. The developers of the new class of insecticides are promising farmers, quote, climate resilience and crop protection. But Tarana's new technology doesn't simply protect plants from bugs. It changes the plants, just like the COVID shots changed you. The spray-on RNA delivers engineered RNA molecules into the plant through tiny tears in its leaves. When the RNA enters the plant cells, it can reprogram the plant. And all the links are in here. It's directly from their documentation. And they're even praising it in some ways, right? But if you read what they're saying or their tweets, unlike GMOs, which are locked into seeds, when this method is applied repeatedly, it has the potential to change the plant over and over again in real time. Tarana's CEO compared it to loading new software into a computer. Only the computer is your food. Just like the computer before was the platform for the shots. Remember the plug and play Moderna thing? Same funding, There's something going on, guys, and this is where it's going. Using the language of nature, we can give plants new instructions. That's what they wrote. Yielding adaptable solutions rooted directly in the plant's natural physiology. Our approach opens a new world of possibilities in annual and perennial crops for the benefit of farmers, people on the planet. Okay, even if you think this is worth investigating, ask yourself how in the world it makes sense to test this in 10 states across the country or wherever, just test it in public, experimental use. Because the problem she's pointing out is that this is not something you can take back when you realize it destroys all the food we can eat or whatever. And I don't think that's by accident, guys. This is insane. Compared to, even if it turns out to be the best thing in the world, doing this without knowing the consequences is insane, if not by design. Compared to Ledpora, Tirana's RNA is far more advanced. It doesn't remain on the surface of leaves. It enters the plant and affects the cells where they replicate. Tirana appears to have submitted an APHIS field trial permit for a tomato-based RNA application. Permit date, June 30th, valid through January 30th, 2026. A field trial. Okay, what if it happens like with Monsanto and it crossbreeds with other? I mean, this is not a joke. And people know this. Maha knows this, and they're doing it anyway. According to the article by Michelle Perro, MD, published July 31st, 2025, quote, I guess it's not a quote. It just simply is going, I thought that's a quote from her article. It says, within just a few years, she cautions, she's framing the article. She cautions these changes could ripple through and destabilize the entire food chain. Or at the very least, that's clearly possible. And it says impacting everything from pollinators like bugs and bees to the delicate balance of the human gut microbiome. It starts to feel like humanity itself is under attack. And quite frankly, people like Kathanasis and Fitz are telling you that. The great poisoning. And it's not about scaring anybody, guys. This is based on literal provable facts we can see. And I'm not claiming I know what the intention is. Now, here's a post from Valerie Ann Smith. USDA approves double-stranded GNA genetic modified apples and potatoes. That was back in 2015. But it is happening, guys. No one's really not talking about it. So she goes on to list a bunch of the things that are happening and really just highlights the current high-risk crops, meaning that they're so prevalent in stores that consumers must seek out and verify non-GMO alternatives. And just the list is crazy. Alfalfa, apples, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, all the normal stuff. And she lists, by the way, a lot of great material here about, and these are all studies, Cell.com, NCBI, RNA meal changes honeybees' DNA genes, just like it changes you. This is important to understand. RNA, and we'll look into this more. We've already done this, by the way, but important when there's an opportunity, we'll bring these back up and go in depth. RNA fed to mice silences DNA genes. GMO RNAi foods already in the food supply chain. See, these are the things that we need to understand. And these are important to remember, guys. And I'll just include this for you to go through. These things are already out there. I don't know how you take that back. Massey has been calling this out. This is from September 30th, 2023. Thomas Massey exposes taxpayer-funded, quote, transgenic edible vaccines, which turns edible plants like lettuce and spinach into mRNA vaccine factories that replace mRNA shots. It's not a joke. Now, whether it's happening or it's just an experiment, or whether that experiment's happening in your hometown, I don't know. So they're going to, other than what we've shown you today, which we do. So they're going to put the mRNA poison into food supply. Well, this is just their personal opinion. The point is that this has been debated back and forth. Now, quickly to wrap up, Valerie Ann Smith also shared this clip. Now, it's something I think they made. It's a compilation, and I'll play the actual discussion back and forth, which I think in and of itself is important to see. But she says, edible mRNA, the threat of the engineered bioweapon inserted into our food is real. I agree. Not, who knows whether it's happening yet, but, oh, you know what? I knew I was going to do that. Yeah, let me play this one first. So there's two clips I wanted to play that she shared. This is from the last tweet.
All this money so that your apple wouldn't brown when sliced. So there's non-browning apple and non-browning potato. It uses something called double-stranded RNA. A little piece of RNA is created in these crops that silence the gene that normally causes the browning. Now, many scientists all over the world are concerned that that little snippet that we eat might reprogram or silence our DNA. And I'll give you an example. Honeybees were fed a double-stranded RNA meal, a single meal that was supposed to be like a control. In other words, no effect whatsoever. Over a period of the next few weeks, over 1,400 genes changed levels of expression compared to those that didn't have that meal. So that's 10% of the genome. We also know that certain mice can change their gene expression when they are eating double-stranded RNA. So now we have potatoes and apples that might change our genetic expression. I think that's extremely dangerous. Our regulatory agencies are not prepared to regulate and test the effects of double-stranded RNA. And in spite of those peer-reviewed published studies, the USDA allowed it on the market.
Yep. And remember, I'll show you in a second what happened in Tennessee when they tried that, which is what I was pointing to. The way they responded was ludicrous. Well, are they there now? That's what they said. It was like, well, that's not the point. It's like, we want to make sure they're labeled. It's like, well, do they exist? It's like, man, you don't do that retroactively. And I think that's actually, I don't think these people are, I don't have a high opinion of their intelligence, but I don't think they're that stupid. I think we'll get to it in a second. Here's the other clip she played.
Don't understand the underlying need or logic.
If a food source has a human vaccine in it, we would deem that a pharmaceutical in Tennessee to make sure that we don't overdose or underdose that food source.
I mean, how's this going to play out?
House Bill 1894 classifies any food that contains a vaccine or vaccine material as a drug under the Tennessee Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act.
So, I mean, think about how crazy it is that they're literally researching how to do that. And so he comes out and says, well, let's get ahead of this and make sure that we have a label ready. They act like he's insane, even though you can prove that it's clearly happening. Some of them act like it's not even real. You know, this is why largely I think a lot of people in those positions are just there because they are that stupid and are easy to manipulate and only listen to the certain sources who feed them what they want. And then others that are involved in the problems and then hide it for their own benefit. You know, yes, I'm very pessimistic when it comes to government. We have every reason to be. Look at your own history. I hope. Every day, I hope. And I watch action. I watch precedent. I watch what they do and whether they follow through, and I'm let down every single time. Like you should be if you're being honest about Trump, Biden, or all the rest.
Defines vaccine or vaccine material as a substance intended for use in humans to stimulate the production of antibodies and provide immunity against disease that is authorized or approved by the United States Food and Drug Administration. Mr. Chairman, I'll answer questions.
Can you give me an example of a food that's a vaccine?
You're right. Yes, sir. University of California, Riverside has already perfected the ability to put human vaccines into our lettuce right now.
Right.
Also tomatoes has the ability to do that also for UC Berkeley. And then Big Tobacco, RJ Reynolds and stuff has perfected the ability to put a human vaccine into tobacco products.
Yes, indeed. That was in Tennessee. Now, here's the clip. I think the kind of continues.
Give me an example of a food that's a vaccine.
You recognize? Yes, sir. University of California, Riverside has already perfected the ability to put human vaccines into our lettuce right now. Also tomatoes has the ability to do that also for UC Berkeley. And then Big Tobacco, RJ Reynolds and stuff has perfected the ability to put a human vaccine into tobacco products.
Tobacco products, guys. Why? Why would they I mean, look, it's not like it's like this is the ridiculous argument that somehow people are just so afraid of needles they just don't want to do, but they would. Look at the statistics. That's just not. Some people are, but no, it's because people are dumb and they're recognizing the problems here, or they just don't want to, or they don't trust the government. Whatever it is, this is surreptitious. This is not about getting it easier for you to digest. They have patches they could use. This is about something else entirely, and it's dark.
Chairman Clements.
And is that even legal to do in the state of Tennessee to sell those with a vaccine in them?
You recognize?
Well, I'm not arguing that point. What I'm saying is there is no law deeming those that when you go into a grocery store, you should know as a consumer, this head of lettuce is a head of lettuce. The head of lettuce right next to it could contain a vaccine in it.
Yeah.
All we're saying is if it does have the vaccine in it, make sure it's listed as a pharmaceutical so people can get the proper dosage.
Doesn't that just seem like, well, aside from the idea that he seems to be, maybe he's got an ulterior motive in it. He's just trying to set the normalization of it. Maybe this is the point. And actually that's one of the best points to make in this is that instead of saying like, should we even be doing this? Right? You get this where it's like, well, we're either going to label it or we're not. It's like, well, everyone's going to go, well, label it, which is sort of like backwardly getting you to support something you don't want to support. Now, I don't know whether that was his intention or not. It's still worth making this point, regardless of that, if that's the case. But realize that the response is just wild. Like, this is very clear that this is happening. It is in the process. They can do it. And so we should very first be like, why are we even doing this? But if we know this is coming and it's inevitable, which I hope not, I honestly think it's already happening, then we damn well better have this in place to be able to force them at least, and even then they'll break the law, they'll secret, they'll lie, but at least some of this will be something people like here. I think the largest win is that if this is forced to happen, that people will then be aware that that's possible. Half the conversation, people dismiss this stuff.
You're recognized.
Thank you. Well, my question is right now, can you walk into a grocery store and there be a head of lettuce for sale that has a vaccine in it? I don't think that's allowed under state law presently. And if it is, and you have to list it as a pharmaceutical, are we going to then have Walgreens pharmacists with a refrigerated section? I mean,
this is just ridiculous. Like this feels like a question designed to make it, to muddle it. And, based on the idea that this is happening and we want to make sure they get the right dose, makes it very specific about how this is supposed to work, just simply labeling it to understand whether or not. And this is the way he goes.
How's this going to play out?
You're recognized.
Thank you. This is more of a consumer protection bill right here, is to make sure that if you're going in to buy tomatoes and there's a polio vaccine in there, that you are aware of what you're buying has a polio vaccine. The problem you have is if it's not treated as a pharmaceutical, being the size and difference between you and me, how many tomatoes do I have to eat to get the proper dosage versus how many tomatoes that you have to eat? And if you eat too many, do you get a overdose?
God. And again, you can look at the whole clip. The point is they kind of look at him like he's just losing his mind. Like it's just, it's like it's stupid, like it's irrational. The science is there. They're telling you they're successful at it. You can see people in positions of government who are arguing that. And your response is like, well, that's silly. It just shows me either these people are that inept at just lacking just critical thinking in general, or that they're boxed out of that, or like just deliberately staying away. Like if you came out and said there's another vaccine style coming out and we want to make sure people are aware it exists, it's the same logic. And they'd be like, well, that makes sense. Something around this is very ridiculous. It's unsettling to see the way they respond to it. And again, to the earlier point, whether it's because they're there because they're this stupid or because they're this willing, they're shadow masters, as David Icke puts it. As actually, did I close that? Oh no, I got the last couple here. Oh, and I'll show you this too. I thought it was last ones. But the point being is that, they're there because they're either that bad or stupid or unable to process the information, or because they're compromised enough or corrupt enough. I'm sorry to have this such a pessimistic view, or just bad view of our government, but pessimistic. But the point is, it's very obvious historically. Just in this administration or the last however many we look at, these people are not acting in your interests. And I'm just so exhausted that people are out there trying to say otherwise when it's, look at how it ended. It's always the other side that made it happen. Fine, whatever. Just acknowledge that it doesn't ever happen. That's all I am. And then hopefully understand that it's just the government. And that's how it's always been. Now, I did this, and many others, by the way. This is from 2021. Self-spreading vaccines, self-amplifying mRNA vaccines, and COVID vaccine, menstrual disruption, 2021. If you support people who are giving you the information that you can research, where you can educate yourself on it, there's source material you can verify way before you get this stuff anywhere else, then support the last American Vagabond, because our track record speaks for itself. Consistently, whether it's Israel, East Palestine, COVID-19, Lahaina, way ahead of the story. Don't forget even Lahaina. We're like this, just getting distracted. These points are, we put things out that then become a center point in the conversation and never even get looked at again outside of the people that follow this platform. Happens over and over and over. And look, it's not about TLAV being focused. It's about the information going the way it's supposed to. And yes, of course, we all want credit for doing the work that we do. But at the end of the day, you'll be ahead of these stories if you follow people that care about principle over partisanship. Simple as that. And last, again, to recognize what David Icke said in the beginning, which is what I was referencing, the dumbest of dumb governments in the UK, the dumbest of dumb governments in the US, the dumbest of dumb governments wherever you look. Coincidence? Not a chance. Dumb people do as their shadow masters tell them. They're too dumb to do anything else. And this is just a person making a post about the UK, but guys, it's everywhere you look right now. It is everywhere you look. You think these things are unique to the United States? It's everywhere. The UK and United States, Germany, Israel, they're leading this charge, and it's insane. It's against human interests, like the species. At least in my opinion, look at what we've seen. Maybe that's the whole point. Maybe it's about somebody trying to use this as a dual weapon. I don't know. But all I know is that it's important that you understand what the facts show and understand where it's going and give you the opportunity to say something about it, to stand up and petition your government if you think it'll make a difference, to stand up and protest if you think it'll make a difference. Educating yourself so you can be informed when you make your choices. Shocking how little that seems to happen today. So thank you for tuning in. If you want to support this platform, there's plenty of links in the chat. There's links under every video. LastAmericanVagabond.com, guys. They'll be there for you. Thank you. As always, I love you all. Question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.